6:03. And I think, Nancy, do you just want to read the notice for the work session tonight so we know what we're talking about?
Vice Mayor, I would love to, take me 1 second here. Notice is hereby given that a work session of the Laramie City Council has been called for Wednesday, November 10th, 2021 at 6:00 p.m. via Zoom meeting, ID number 81629621479, passcode 842422, to discuss the following topic. Number 1, work session for the process of redistricting and ward boundaries.
Great, thanks, Nancy.
You're welcome.
How about if we start with item number 2 on our agenda regarding public comments on non-agenda items. I see 2 attendees in our room this evening, in our attendees waiting room. If you would raise your hand if you're interested in making a public comment. Okay, well, I don't see any public comments this evening on non-agenda items. Let's move on to item number 3, which has to do with our topic, redistricting and ward boundaries. And it looks like we've got our friends over at the county and our county clerk's office. So, Nancy, do you want to introduce and roll this out, or Janine or Bob, or how are we going to do it?
Vice Mayor, I would love to go ahead and get us started here. As you mentioned, we do have our Albany County Clerk's office here to assist with the redistricting process and timelines and stuff. So we want to welcome them to the meeting tonight. The city staff will kind of take lead on this work session. However, they'll provide us some additional information as we go along here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation for tonight. So right now for our ward boundary committee, we have City Manager Janine Jordan, City Attorney Bob Southard, myself, City Clerk Nancy Bartholomew, and our City GIS Analyst Sean Kraft. The next slide here, we just wanted to kind of dive into what the process for ward boundaries is going to kind of look like in summation. So we will start out with tonight's work session. And that is to just kind of inform the council of what the process will kind of look like for ward boundaries. In February, sometime between February and March, the legislature will finalize the the House and Senate district boundaries. After they have voted on those lines, we'll go ahead and start our ordinance process. Right now, we have it tentatively set for February 22nd. However, the dates that you see in front of you will possibly change slightly as we get more information from the county clerk and as the legislature votes on things. But we just wanted to give you a general idea of kind of what we're looking at as far as when these things will come. So we'll go ahead and have an ordinance in front of the council the end of February to start readings. Have the second reading on March 1st and the third reading on March 8th. This will give us enough time to meet any deadlines from the Albany County Clerk's office so that she can meet her deadlines set by statutory, set in statute. So I know on the next slide, Jackie has gotten some updated dates for us. She's been trying to help assist and what the redistricting process looks like and what her timelines are in accordance with the legislature. So Jackie, I don't know if you and your team want to provide any additional information here. Right now we have on here that as of the last redistricting meeting, the region maps proposals were due November 5th. The joint corporations interim meeting was to happen between December 1st and 2nd. That's when they vote on the proposals and submit a formal bill draft, or ask the LSO to go ahead and draft a bill to go to the legislature during the regular session. And then we'll have the regular legislative session there. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing for just a moment, just to allow Jackie's team to share any additional information they might have on this topic.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for allowing us to partake with you as we go through this redistricting process. I have to commend Nancy for working on a timeline that was really kind of set the stage of where we needed to look to fill in the blanks. So thank you, Nancy. I did promise her yesterday that I would get her our updated timeline. I've had auditors all day today as my friends in my office, and so I did not get that done, although I did forward it to you just about 5 minutes ago, Nancy. I am well aware that the date for submission for plans across the state are to be submitted to the Joint Corporations Committee by next Friday, November 19th. So that timeline moved from November 5th through to November 19th. They do still plan to have a joint corporations meeting commencing on December 1st, which is a Wednesday, but I heard today that they have extended it to go the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, primarily because of all the work that needs to be done and the discussions that need to be had, besides listening to any proposed legislation that's going to be brought forth to the committee for any consideration. Knowing that that kind of schedule is in place right now, we don't know anymore as to what the committee or the legislature plans to do. We know that the session commences on Monday, February 14th. And because it's a budget session, it's a 20-day session, so there's a short window there. And so in between basically working with and through the process, we have a lot of work that needs to be done. And so we look forward to collaborating with you and working together on this.
Thank you for those updates, Jackie. We appreciate it. Vice Mayor, at this time, if the council have any questions as we go here, feel free to let us know. But otherwise, I'll just move to the next slide that we have for now, and we can answer any questions at the end of this as well. So the next slide here is just to kind of give you a summary of what the City Council's role is in the adoption of ward boundaries. So in order to adopt new boundaries, the City Council will need to pass an ordinance that divides the wards back into nearly equal proportions. So that's part of what we're going to be working on in the next couple of months, coming up to the legislature voting to set the district boundaries. Ordinance must be adopted in a timely manner. We kind of talked about that to make sure that the county clerk has enough time to meet statutory requirements. And as we mentioned, the dates might change a little bit as we look at the updates that we've received today. So, but in general, this is kind of what we're looking at for our timeline. So with that, Vice Mayor, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to our city manager, and she'll kind of give us an update here on the map that's provided, and kind of let you know what we're looking at here and why it's so important that we do this.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. I also have our city engineer, Eric Japp, here, and our GIS specialist, Sean Kraft, may be joining us here before too long. Sean is really an integral part of the team, GIS is, and that falls under the supervision of the city engineer. So what I will show you is a map created by Mr. Kraft, and this looks at your ward boundaries as they're currently established in ordinance. And it shows you, based on the new census data from 2020, how the ward boundaries measure up, so to speak, in terms of population. What you can see, if you look at the very bottom of the right-hand side of your screen, is that the 2020 census population shows that in Ward 1, although it's our geographically largest ward, it appears to be our population-wise smallest at 9,469 people. Ward 2, through the center of the community, is 9,633 persons. And then you'll see in Ward 3, we see a really disproportionate amount of constituents or citizens at 12,015 people. So our goal is to rebalance the wards to the ward boundaries, that is, in order to establish equal population in each of the 3 wards. When they tell you that you won't use story problems in your future, this is a good example of why that isn't necessarily true. So anyway, that hopefully is just a really simple map to kind of outline the exercise that we'll be dealing with. Sean will help us through that under Eric's supervision and working with myself and Nancy and Bob Southard and the council here on the city team. If you have any questions for me about the map, and we don't have the ability to play with the map tonight, nor did we really intend for this work session to go that route, but I know that's where everybody's mind is going. So I'll share with you, that's an exercise for a future meeting, but that's what you'll be doing. Any questions for me, and then I'll give it back to Nancy.
Council, just jump in there if you have a question for our city manager, Janine, because I can't really see everybody all that well.
Okay, Councilor Schuster, we know that a dorm is moving from Ward 3 to Ward 2 within a couple of years. Are they going to take that into consideration, or will they worry about that in 10 years when the next census is taken?
Through you, Vice Mayor, I'm happy to address that and invite our county clerk and or our city attorney to weigh in. But I think the answer, as I know it, is no. We have to look at 2020 census numbers, even though we all will understand that there is a big shift in population that will happen in, 2, 3, 4 years. But certainly, as we know that, that's something that we'll probably want to take into account as we contemplate the boundaries. Jackie, or I guess first Bob Southard, do you want to add anything? And then Jackie, you can jump in if you'd like to as well.
I will add this. You're absolutely correct, except for the take that into account as we do ward boundaries. We can't. We have to balance the population between these 3 wards. Just as these 3 wards that you see are current wards, we knew that population was moving into the eastern part of the city. Couldn't take that into account until now. That'll be true with if the dorms move someday.
Go ahead, Erin. I see that you're raising your hand.
So by my math, the balance would be 10,372 people in each ward. So that means that Ward 1 is short 900 people and Ward 2 is short, I don't know, it's like 700 people that we could take from Ward 3.
Your math is correct.
Vice Mayor, I have a question.
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're okay. Thanks. Janine, you mentioned that we might have an upcoming work session to divide up the wards into different pieces. And I was just wondering if we could have access to that ahead of the meeting. I feel like all of us coming with, those of us that wish to draw lines, I think having some time to do that would be helpful, rather than sort of do it on the fly. I'm not sure if that's an option, but just wanted to ask for it if it is.
Thank you through you, Vice Mayor, Councilor Harrington. That is a great question, and it will prove a good segue to the next slide. So I just ask if the county clerk wants to add anything on this slide, and then if not, we'll go to the next slide where we're going to get to talking about process.
Thank you, Janine. I have nothing to offer. Both you and Bob are correct in regards to the dorm information we have to use with the data that's provided at this time.
Thank you. All right, Nancy B., it's all yours.
Right, thank you, Vice Mayor and Council. So as we talked about before, right now our ward boundary committee from the city is the city manager, city attorney, city clerk, and the city GIS analyst. So part of what we're hoping to get from tonight's work session is what the council's desire is for council representation. And of course, Jackie's team is helping out with this as well, which we greatly appreciate. So, so these are the three options that we kind of see before us. You know, what would the council representation look like? We could have all 9 members be a part of it. We could have 3 to 4 council members be a part of the committee, or we could have no council member representation, which is probably not likely, but you know, we put it in there as an option. So what the boundary committee is going to be doing is basically what Brian Harrington has alluded to. We're going to be trying to figure out what our options are for ward boundaries, taking into account things like what the redistricting boundaries may look like. That may be a consideration. It does affect voting, which is part of why Albany County Clerk's Office is a part of the process, because they're directly affected by how the ward boundaries are set. So we do have that to take into consideration. In 2011, 2012, our process was slightly different because we were decreasing the number of wards at that time from 7 to 3. So by statute, we were required to have 9 council members and an equal amount of petitioners involved in the committee. So that's the way the process was back then. However, this year we're not having to meet that statutory requirement, and that's why the council have an option of how they participate in the process to get to the ordinance in February. With that, that is the last slide that we had. So what we're kind of hoping to do is get a little bit of feedback from the council as to what direction you'd like to go, so that we know who we're including in on these meetings moving forward.
Okay, so how about if we finish up with some questions? Because I've got a few questions as well. So I saw Councilor Gabriel, it looked like he had his hand up, so go ahead.
Oh, Vice Mayor, I was just going to suggest having a representative from each of the wards on that committee. I think that makes really good sense, but that's all I had.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments not related to the moving forward piece, but just related to the redistricting in general? I see Councilor Schuster.
Thank you. I would love if we could do something just that simple, is if we take all the dorms, move it into 2, and then that would take the proper amount of people and throw it into there, and then you don't have to make a slight adjustment to Ward 2 to satisfy Ward 1's population growth. Because we know that eventually some of the dorms are moving that way, so that would help in the long run for everybody out.
Councillor O'Doherty?
I had a similar idea, but I wanted to say that I like the idea of one counselor per ward. And then my question for Jackie is, how limited are you on precincts? I think I read in statute you have like 40 in it. That's the maximum in a county. I don't know if that's so. Can you divide precincts in a logical way to make the wards work?
That was close to my question. So, Jackie, go ahead.
Thank you, Erin, for your question. Wyoming statute allows for 30 precincts, and it was our goal in 2022 to basically go to vote centers. Obviously, that will not happen, but we will probably look at trying to consolidate as best as we can so that in 2024, we have already laid the foundation to make the change to vote centers be almost seamless. And so that's a goal. Whether or not we get it accomplished this go around, that's certainly going to be our attempt.
Thanks. I think we had Fred Schmuckel was next, and then Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I just wanted to follow and say that I also agree that one council member per ward is probably a great idea just to kind of streamline this. But I also stand against the idea of trying to predict where growth is going to happen, because we can't really define the line between where the university is going to grow and other known projects that are out there. I also repeat that Crane Hall and Hill Hall were supposed to be torn down here back when I lived in them back in the early 2000s. And they've been talking about that, and yet they still stand. So I'm not convinced that the university is going to be tearing those dorms down anytime soon and adjusting those populations. I think planning policy based on predictions of the university comes with its own warning label. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Harrington.
I had a question for Jackie, Vice Mayor. I was just curious, having never been through this before, the precincts are flexible at this point. So the precincts are redrawn more, I would assume, based on the House districts as those settle. And then the precincts are drawn. I guess I'm trying to figure out the order of operations here. Like, it seems really helpful for this committee that we're forming to know where the precincts are. That would be helpful in us dividing our wards. But I'm also not sure whether it would be easier to just draw the precincts after the wards have been decided. I guess I'm looking for a little advice on like order of operations, and I'm sure like half the people on this call are thinking we have a solution to that, but I don't know it.
Our preference would be to draw the precincts after the fact, because we certainly want to make sure we don't have any splits within precincts that could create confusion for the electors, for the election judges when they have to distribute ballots. So it would probably be most advantageous for us to wait until after the fact.
That's great. I think that's the most flexibility for the council and everyone else involved as well. So thanks, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, do we have any other questions not related to the direction that our city clerk was asking about, but more about the process or dividing Laramie by 3? So, anybody else? Okay, I don't see anybody else. I'm gonna throw out a comment related to that division. Currently our lines are somewhat drawn on a north-south basis. I'd really be curious to see what it would look like if we could potentially draw those lines on an east-west basis. I don't know if that's possible, but it's interesting to me to potentially think about that. But that's certainly something we can do when we're able to play with the population, when we know where the population centers are. But that's really my only comment. Councillor Cumby and Councillor Somerville, you've not made. Go ahead, Councillor Somerville.
Well, I do have a comment, but the city attorney was trying to get your attention.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, I just wanted to respond to your comment, Jane. The wards just have to be compact and equal. Everything else is up for discussion. That is not tonight's discussion. We're just talking about, I think we want to get guidance from you on how what committee we put together, with who and when. Okay. But no, your question is absolutely appropriate. We could do them on the diagonal, for that matter. I'm not suggesting it, but from north to south, we do east to west. That's immaterial, as long as they're compact and balanced.
Okay, great, thanks. Anybody else? Go ahead, Andy.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. So I just want to make a comment kind of in terms of moving forward. So I've heard certainly some council members express that only one member from each ward should be on the committee. I have to say I don't agree with that. I think that there are 9 council members that all need to participate in this process and need to be able to have input at the ground level. It's a lot easier when we start with everybody participating in the process rather than one person from each ward, and then we get to a meeting and the other 6 council members don't like it for whatever reason, and then we end up trying to redraw boundary maps during an actual council meeting. So I just wanted to throw out a suggestion, which is I think that each of the wards should meet separately and play with the boundaries a little bit, and then those ward members can come to a consensus and then designate one member to go back to a larger committee to put together the final map. That would be my recommendation and certainly my preference in terms of how we move forward.
Great. Councillor Somerville, thank you. Councillor Harrington, you want to jump in there? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I just had a question for Councillor Somerville, and maybe for the larger group. So in that arrangement, which, I'm not opposed to that arrangement. I'm just curious how that would function with sort of all of these staff members also tasked with doing this. They're obviously not going to be at the sort of like small ward meeting amongst us. And I don't know that I want to send 3 proposals back to a group and sort of eliminate all of the sort of non-political part of this. I'm a little wary of eliminating that whole piece.
Councillor Harrington, let me think about that for a minute. In terms of, I don't know that you can, I wasn't too concerned about the staff because I was envisioning the original ward meetings being, the city clerk and maybe our GIS specialist, and just that ward getting together to talk about, what about north to south, right? Is that something that anybody's interested in? Or which areas, what does that ward, those ward members think adding or subtracting from their ward would best fit their ward, essentially, and just trying to get those ideas. I'm imagining a process where it might need to go back and forth a couple of times, but I think we have that time to do that if we start those meetings now. Now, we don't know where the legislative districts are, and that will certainly change things, but that doesn't mean that as ward members, we couldn't meet in December and January after we have a draft proposal to kind of see where everything was at. And in terms of representation and the political piece of this, I was looking at it more as in there's 9 elected council members to represent the city, and each of the 3 members should probably be given a chance. And I just have seen this stuff in the past where you try to do a large group and only a couple of people bring the map and have not had any input, and then it turns into a mess. And what I was trying to avoid was a council meeting where we're sitting there for 4 or 5 hours asking Sean and Nancy to draw the map during the council meeting, essentially. So that's kind of what I was thinking in terms of that. But I certainly welcome some comments from staff as well.
Councillor Harrington, do you have a response in regard to Councillor Somerville? But because I know I have Councillor Cumby waiting.
And I've already asked my question, so if Councillor Cumby would like to go, it is in response to Councillor Somerville, but it's sort of a different direction to some extent.
That would be okay with me.
Okay.
So the question I had, Councillor Somerville, would it not function almost in exactly the same way for us all as individuals to draw what we thought the map should be as an individual, submit those to to this larger group? That larger group would be made up of a council member from each ward and all of the staff members. And then if you, Councillor Smeckel, and myself want to get together and sort of like talk through it, of course, we'd be welcome to, or any other arrangement. But as individuals, we all propose maps to the committee, and then the committee, brings what they feel like is the most compact and equitable ward proposal forward for discussion at council, at a formal council meeting.
Councillor Harrington, I think that is probably not quite what I had envisioned, and my question would be on the technical aspect of using the redistricting software. I think that we'll need some staff support to do that, and trying to limit not having 9 members going separately into the council or to go see staff to help draw maps. But I do see the point with that. Again, just trying to make sure, I think my underlying point is just trying to make sure that all 9 council members participate from the get-go, not waiting until we get to a meeting later with a map.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Cumby.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I concur with Councillor Somerville in that I think it's important that we all have some level of participation. I'm very interested in participating, but as a person who's been on city council for 10 months, I would not want to be the only representative from Ward 2. I think that I could learn a lot and become a better council person by working with my other 2 councilors. And I really benefit so much from the collaborative process when we get together and we hash out ideas. And I would rather not kind of sit in my office all by myself and decide on how I think it should be divided, no input from anyone, and then I contribute that. I would rather have more of a collegial process. And I think it could work. And then there may be a point at which certain decisions or considerations have been made, and then out of the 3 members for each ward, we might select one person to go in to the final, to represent the ward. But I certainly would like to see participation. And I took Councillor Gabriel as suggesting that there would be at least representation from each of the wards. I didn't hear Councillor Gabriel say one person per ward. But anyway, that's kind of my opinion. I had a number of other questions that people have asked, and they have been answered. Thank you.
Great. I saw Councillor O'Doherty.
Yeah, I think that since our whole legislative representation from Albany County likes Senator Rothfuss's map, that we should use that as a basis and see how the heck we can get 3 wards out of that. I know that Jackie's clever about, where where things had to be shaved off, like in how part of House District 13 is in Ward 1. So I'm confident that we can do that. That redistricting.wyoledge.gov, that map, it's pretty intuitive, and I'm happy to, if people want to go over it with me, I can show you how you can play around with it. And if we start with that map, and then try to figure out the ward boundaries from there, I don't think it makes sense to do it in separate wards, because then if I have mine going like this and Andy has hers going like this, then there's, you can't bring it together. So, I mean, because the boundaries are what we're trying to figure out. So if we did those as separate wards, how do you come up with a map? So I think we have to work together, and I'm happy to help people with this Maptitude online redistricting tool if you want to play around with things yourself and then come up with what you think is the best plan. Thanks.
I see Counselor Schuster had his hand raised. I hope I didn't skip anyone or miss anybody.
Thank you. Being on council quite a while, coming in when we had our more wards than we have now, and going down to it, one counselor, wasn't me, actually got forced out and couldn't rerun because they moved him from a ward to a ward. And I know a couple of you are within, including me, within 1 or 2 blocks from a ward. And I've seen this happen before where you've got moved into another ward and it all really changed a lot. If we have 3 separate meetings, do we have to do a meeting notification for each one of the meetings? I'm wondering about where we're going to do this. Do they have to be open to the public? So, I mean, I'm not so much in favor of all of us meeting at once, but I am in favor of that because it makes it so easy to notify the public saying we're going to have this meeting with all counselors present that want to show up. I'm not going to force anybody that has to be there because we are missing one tonight. So, I mean, but I see it in the legal notifications a lot easier to have one notification instead of, we talked about 3 meetings possibly with each ward. So then we have 9 different meeting notifications. Is it going to be on Zoom? Who's going to run the meeting? It's going to get really complicated, I'm afraid, before this is over.
Any other comments regarding moving forward that we really haven't heard yet? I'll go ahead and say something. Or go ahead, Councilor Cumby.
I just want to say, Councilor Schuster, I think you've brought up some very salient and practical points, and I agree with you.
Yeah, it's very similar to what I was going to say. If we have, I mean, if we have all of us as a group, we have to have public notice and obviously paid, right? And all that kind of stuff, which, could be costly and certainly worth thinking about. We could also divide into wards and come up, each ward, each group of counselors in each ward could come up with multiple documents or multiple ideas and submit to a smaller group, and then maybe have a council meeting after that because there may be similar ideas from one group to the next. I don't know, but if we all, or maybe we all just singularly submit some suggestions and see what we come up with. I don't know, but and I know, Nancy, this isn't helping you, but Yeah, and I do have a question for Jackie, so did I hear you say you wanted to think about the precincts after the wards are determined? I mean, from my perspective, it's just so easy. Maybe I'm just so used to the way it is now. It's just so easy to know which precincts are in a ward, right? As opposed to determining a ward and then coming up with precincts. But you're the real expert in this, and I guess I need a little help understanding maybe why the precincts would come after the fact.
Jane, thank you for your question. Certainly, it would be difficult to do it prematurely because the lines could change. And then again, our biggest concern is having splits within a certain area, and we want to avoid that. And so that's how we've worked in the past, and it's worked best that way. Not to say that it wouldn't warrant giving us or having us try to align our precincts prior to some proposed maps to look at. But I think we really would like to work and know what our boundaries are and avoid, we'll have a lot of work in between. We're trying to basically, I don't know if you're aware of the timeline. There's a lot that's going to go on between now and when the redistricting, the plan for the state of Wyoming is adopted. And we'll do as much preliminary work as we can, but we have such a short window after that. So we want to make sure that we're not spending a lot of time developing something that may not work at the end.
Okay, great.
Jane, I think that, Jackie, you could correct me, but I think you were saying that you would want the House district boundaries before the ward boundaries to help you decide the precinct boundaries. Is that right?
That's correct, Erin.
Yeah, but maybe that's just an impossible ask given the timeline, is kind of what I'm hearing.
That's why I'm recommending we go with the Senator Rothfuss map as a starting point.
Okay. All right. So I think I saw Councilor Cumby, then Harrington, and Somerville. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Harrington.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. I guess I'm just, we had a conversation earlier about east-west wards rather than, north-south wards. Nope, very long and skinny east to west. I'll get there eventually. Those things feel like impossible conversations to have if the three of us with vested interest in staying as close to how it is now. I mean, we all live in sort of different parts of our wards, with some exceptions. I know some of you are neighbors, but save for that, we all have sort of an interest in things staying pretty similar to how they are so that we all can continue our service to Laramie. I think some of those, especially if we're going to shift towards the House districts, that's probably going to mean some shifting on who represents what ward on this council into the future. So I'm just wary of us getting together in like these discrete groups that all have sort of a real stake in everything staying exactly how it is, and knowing that we're going to need to change something. So we're going to end up just like, I think, bumping things out, grabbing people from other wards in a way that's maybe not practical or serving Laramie into the future, right? Like it serves all of us because we stay in our seats, but in 9 years from now, maybe it's not the best map. So I would be interested in all of us, I guess, just to say very frankly what I think we should all draw our own maps and submit them to a committee that has a representative from each ward and then the staff members listed. I think that's the easiest way. And then the council will hear all of it as a group, and we can draw maps on the fly if we want to. That will certainly be our option.
Councilor Somerville.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So I have a couple of different comments. The first is the Rothfuss map that was described a couple of weeks ago is a huge problem in terms of drawing West Laramie into districts. It is a huge, monumental problem, and I certainly expressed my concerns at the last meeting, and I won't do that again. But there's no way to avoid, like, Ward 1 as it's set up now, not having multiple representatives and splitting precincts and all of this other stuff as it sits right now without a whole lot of intensive work. What I'm interested in is the city council really sitting down and designing what we want the wards to be to work for our city. I understand the legislative districts, and I am as interested as anybody else in terms of trying to keep voting simple and the lines clean, and precincts succinct, and I appreciate that. But I don't want to be relegated to those. That's a concern. The second comment I wanted to make is I was not thinking about moving ward boundaries in terms of who can run for election. There are processes in place in our code to govern that. If a line moves and you, I believe, and city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but if the line moves next year and you suddenly end up in a different ward, you still finish out your term as you were elected, and then at the next election you just run in the different ward. So if your house moves from, I'm in Ward 1 now and I suddenly become Ward 3 next year, I finish out my term, and then the next time after I finish that term, I just run in Ward 3. So I don't know that that's actually a real valid conversation for any of us to have in terms of how it may affect things. The last comment I want to make is I'm going to make a stake for the ward people to get together, because one thing we have not talked about in this process at all yet is the public process. Do we owe our constituents and City of Laramie residents the ability to come in and talk to their ward members about how they want their wards to be drawn, and if they have any interest in it? And we need to be able to set up a process, I think, for that doesn't involve crashing in March when we're trying to pass potentially emergency ordinances based on the legislative session, because it's unlikely that 6 days after the session starts, we're going to have legislation signed by the governor. So our timeline is getting crunched, and we need to provide the public a real opportunity to comment on this. So I'm going to make a major push for the wards need to get together. And the idea was they can talk about their ideas, hash it out, send it to the bigger committee with one rep from each ward. The bigger committee can put those things together, and then that rep can come back and talk to the other ward members and say, okay, this is what the other wards are doing. This is what's proposed. What do you think? And you can easily do some back and forth. And as on the public notice side, I think we should provide some type of opportunity for the public to comment. But as long as we keep it to 3 council members, there's no pay attached, no public notice. All of those things don't attach. So Vice Mayor, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Great. I saw our city clerk, Nancy Bartholomew.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I just wanted to give a couple of suggestions or ideas to the council. We would normally have ward meetings on November 30th. Given our really tight timeline here, if the council members are wanting to meet with their constituents, maybe that is a good opportunity to advertise to come to a ward meeting and discuss ward boundaries with your council representatives. So I just wanted to throw that out there. The other thing is just keeping in mind that we do have to keep all of our meetings in a fairly tight window to allow us to be able to draft the legal verbiage in the ordinance before it comes to you later. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. But that's all I had, Vice Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, City Clerk. Do we have any other comments? I don't see any. So I guess to kind of summarize, and somebody help me out here if I haven't summarized very well, it seems to me that we'd like some sort of a combination of meetings and and plans where the ward, where, you know, each of the wards is kind of doing some work and working with our constituents and coming up with some ideas. And it also seems to me that we might want to have a couple other meetings as a full council once we have some ideas and plans rolling. So did I have I heard that correctly? And maybe we ask Janine and Bob and Nancy to kind of come up with a plan that facilitates, I think, A and B on that list in some sort of a rotational span or in some sort of a rotation, if that makes sense. I also like Nancy's idea in terms of our ward meetings, November 30th. I think, yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a good suggestion. Do we have another 5th Tuesday between now and when we have to have this done? Can anybody look at a calendar really quick to see if that's a possibility? And maybe we just need to do a little advertising and maybe, you know, get an email created or something where people can drop their suggestions, where constituents can, you know, drop some suggestions or gather up their thoughts. Because I do like Councilor Somerville's suggestion about engaging the public. So, Nancy, do we have?
We do not, Vice Mayor.
Okay. I see Councilor Schmeckel. Do you have a comment? And then Councilor Cumby?
I just wanted to say that the next 5th Tuesday I can see is in March of 22.
Okay.
So.
Councilor Cumby?
My comment as well.
Okay. So am I kind of close to what we're all talking about, or does somebody else want to summarize better than I have? Because I'd be perfectly fine with that. So, or maybe just ask Janine and Nancy, you know, kind of what you've heard and what thoughts you might have, or if you want to get in there with some ideas. Bob too, if you know, if you have some thoughts to kind of pull the whole group together and try to get everybody on the same page.
I have a big question. Let's say we draw a map. How do we know how many people we have moved from one district to the next district? Is it
It's
just
in
gonna
that
be a
software that
ballpark
I was
guess?
telling you about. It's in that redistricting.wyoledge.gov. It breaks it down by census blocks so you can see. I'm working on one right now, trying to balance those 3 wards, but it's all right there. So it shows you how many people are in each census block. So I'm happy to show you that, Councilor Schuster.
Thank you.
So in other words, Councilor O'Doherty, when you change the lines and you block in an area, the software is able, you can hover over that and it gives you the totals, and you change the line and it gives you the new totals.
Yeah, you move census blocks and the census blocks have totals. And maybe the county clerk knows that I'm off base or something, but that's what I've been messing with, because it seems like a good tool. Took a little while to get used to it, but now I'm cooking with solar.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Go ahead.
The Albany County Clerk's Office has been extremely helpful in this process. They've done a similar process to form a draft themselves to try to help with a suggestion for ward boundaries. So, yeah, So they've been wonderful with that. One thing I wanted to ask the council, given our full schedule between now and the end of December, are the council members generally available on Wednesdays for additional work sessions?
I am. How about raise your hand if you have a conflict? I don't see any, so it appears that we're okay.
City Manager, did you have any thoughts on the process?
You know, I don't. As Councilor O'Doherty has said, I think that the software available on the Legislative Service Office site would allow either individual members or groups of members to go in and kind of play with the map. And so that's a really good starting point. Nancy, I think you've circulated that link to council previously, have you? Or did that come from Jackie's office? I can't remember.
I want to say, I know in Jackie's redistricting work sessions, it was mentioned a couple of times. I don't know if we've circulated it, but if we haven't, we'll certainly do that again.
Okay, strikes me we want to put that in the hands of everybody, Vice Mayor. And then if you, as a council, if you'd like us to sort of take some guiding principles like you had suggested, Vice Mayor, and bring back a schedule, we could do something like that if that seems the easiest way to get through this group work.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. I mean, especially if it's some sort of combination of A and B or 1 and 2 on our choices that has us going back and forth in groups, and then as a council. I think that's what I'm hearing generally, and with some citizen involvement, constituent involvement is really important. So yeah. Is that close? Go ahead, Janine.
I just wanted to kind of restate my understanding, and Nancy and Bob, if you want to jump in, you can. But what I'm hearing is, going back to Nancy's slide, we do not want a committee of 9 council members. We want some smaller group, but we want every counselor to have an opportunity to submit a map. Am I correct? I'm just looking for head nods. No. Okay.
That's
Go ahead,
kind
Councilor B.
that's not what I was thinking, that, you know, we all go off by ourselves and we write a map and then we send it in, and, you know, there's possibility of duplicating work or not really understanding work. And I really wanted to work collaboratively, but which is what I'm kind of used to. But that was not my understanding.
Go ahead, Councilor O'Doherty.
If our county clerk already has a draft of one, I'd love to have that as a starting point, and then have us look at that in smaller groups and say, yeah, would this work? Am I understanding you right, that Jackie, that you have some draft, like just an idea?
Erin, yes, we do. We were we were trying to help and use the software ourselves, and working with not only the House districts, but also looking at the ward boundaries. And I have to give credit to Stacy from my election team. She, like you, Erin, it sounds like, really enjoys going in and finds the software very user-friendly. It does provide you the population and gives you the data that you need per each census block. And so, but we did, and we provided that information to both Nancy and to Sean.
counselors, I'd propose we use that as a starting point and then see what we think, like what we'd want to tweak.
I agree.
That sounds good to me. Nancy, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I was just going to mention that as proposals get closer, get narrowed down and stuff, Sean Kraft will be helping us to clearly define those as well, probably in this process as our GIS and analyst. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Great, thanks.
So I think, City Manager, what I am gathering is that they, the council would like to meet with constituents, meet as a body of 9, and discuss the proposals that they've submitted, and then start to narrow it down from there. Is that kind of what I'm hearing in general?
Yeah, I think that's pretty close. I do like the idea of a couple folks getting together, potentially working with Councilor O'Doherty. Now I'm volunteering Erin, but you know, she seems to have a pretty good handle on on this. So, you know, maybe for those of us that have a stronger interest could, I mean, I downloaded the app, but I haven't even had a chance to take a look at how it works, you know, in terms of the population numbers. So,
Vice Mayor, my understanding from past years is the fewer the maps got to be, the easier the process was. So if the councilors did have the opportunity to get together to form a suggestion as a ward, that would probably be very helpful in the process of consolidating it down to 1 so we can form an ordinance.
okay. Well, I'm still a little confused and not exactly sure what we've all decided on, but Nancy and Janine and Bob, are you feeling okay? Or just ask us directly what, I mean.
I'll ask, what do you want? I mean, how do you want it to go?
Yeah, Councilor O'Doherty.
I would suggest that we start with the map that the county clerk's office is proposing. We take that to our ward meetings at the end of this month. Take a look and see what we think. And then if we think that we need to tweak something, then we discuss it with the other boards and see how that works out.
Yeah, that's a pretty good start. I mean, that way we don't have to make that's actually a short couple week process, and then we can get back together and see what comes from that discussion. That's good. That way we're not locked into anything. We'll just plan on getting together that first week. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but that right away in December sometime. Early in December.
So so I'm trying to understand this. You all would like to, at your ward meetings, have this discussion amongst the 3 counselors from each ward, and then do what?
Then discuss as a body changes that anybody proposes.
Aaron, would it be, I mean, I might be inserting a step here, but to Councilor Somerville's point, there might be an interest in the ward members compiling the feedback we receive from the public, see if there's a workable solution, then that is the process, that is the moment that each individual ward would make any modification they wanted to make before bringing it back to the working group or whoever's, putting together the ordinance for
And
council consideration.
my understanding is we use the board meeting as public input and discussion among our other ward councilors.
Vice Mayor,
Go ahead, Councilor
to
Somerville.
kind of put a finer point on it. So we do the ward meetings, we get the input, the ward members get together, formalize kind of a recommendation to go. If it would be easier for the city staff, since they already have a committee, those ward members can designate one person to get that information back to the city manager, the city attorney, the GIS specialist, all of that stuff. And then we can bring those suggestions to a council meeting, to a council work session. I think that's what I'm hearing.
That's kind of what I'm hearing too. Is everybody okay or kind of okay with that? I see affirmative, if we can get some thumbs up. Okay. Okay, so we've got step one, pretty solid, and then we'll figure out once we have that council meeting or that work session, what step two becomes. How does that sound? Yeah, good? Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah, it was hard for me to get there myself, so I apologize. Do we have any other comments related to this work session within our group here? And then I'll go to public comments on item number 3A. Doesn't look like it. So do we have any public comments? Item number 3A on our agenda. If our public attendees could raise your hand, I can call on you if you have any comments. I don't see any. So, and that's it on my agenda, folks. So I think we're good. Is everybody okay with calling this evening to a close and this meeting to a close?
Can I just make one comment? Since I see that Judy is among us, I'm sure the League of Women Voters will want to weigh in. And so if people come to ward meetings, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, I think they were instrumental in the last go round. So so that's good. Yeah, go ahead and let Ms. Snoke in the room. Thanks. Go ahead, Judy, when you're ready.
That's very funny to call me Miss Snoke. Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. While we're being formal, and Jackie knows me well enough to know that I am not formal. But yes, I will be taking this back to League and making sure that they have input into this and are aware of the 5th ward meeting and anything else. So I thank you. I appreciate that opportunity.
Great. Good.
So Vice Mayor, just to wrap up, we'll go ahead and get notice out to the councilors as soon as possible for the ward meetings, so you can disseminate that to your constituents, as well as publishing that in the paper. And then we'll work on that timeline and get that out to you. So we'll have due dates after the ward meetings and when our next meeting will be. So we'll get that out to you as soon as possible.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. Janine or Bob, do you have any, it looks like, Janine, do you have any comments? Any closing comments or questions for us? So I think we're good, right? Are we good? Okay, everyone. Bye, thanks.
Thank you.